West Ham United 0, Newcastle 1. Frustrating game. I don't think there were too many things that went in our favour, to be honest, which we're going to get into. I thought it was quite an intense, but not intense game at the same time. I think Newcastle, as we mentioned in the preview, definitely had one eye on Sunday's Carabao Cup final against Liverpool. And yeah, you could see West Ham. We were just a little bit reluctant to bypass the Newcastle press. So we're going to break down everything that happened in the game with our tactical review show as normal. So if you enjoy it, leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel for more content. And yeah, let's start with the lineups and how both teams kind of went about their business. As we anticipated, we didn't expect there to be any changes for West Ham, having given the fact that we'd won 2 in a row. And Newcastle, we knew that they had some injuries and suspensions. So the likes of Harvey Barnes came in for Anthony Gordon. They managed to play Livramento at left back, Trippier right back. And yeah, they did go as strong as possible, which is interesting. No one was kind of rotated. And also Isak as well was one of the ones that was under contention as to whether he would start, but he did get the start under Eddie Howe and yeah, managed around 75, 80 minutes, I believe, in the game as well. When we look at an overview of the statistics, West Ham just edged possession with 51% to Newcastle's 49. Our expected goals were pretty much half of Newcastle's with 0.72 to their 1.4. Total number of shots, both the same at 9. Newcastle had one more shot on target than us. They created 2 more big chances, missed one more big chance, slightly less passes, and 1 more corner than us. And then on the right-hand side there, you can kind of see the momentum graph from the first half with Newcastle pretty much dominating a lot of it. And then the second half, West Ham trying to gain control of the match. And Newcastle kind of just sat a little bit deeper, conserved their energies levels a little bit more. And yeah, just done a number on West Ham in that second half. I think we ran out of ideas. But let's focus on the first half because as we set up, it was very clear how Newcastle were going to play. And they opted for a man-to-man press, which was really, really interesting because it limited our... I mean, if you look at the Leicester game, for example, very, very passive. They sat off. They allowed us to build up from the back. Our back three squeezed up really, really high, and we kind of suffocated Leicester into their central zone. Newcastle did not allow that, and Newcastle were a fantastic pressing team. Eddie Howe's an excellent coach. So what he did was his front three was effectively pressing our back three, and then their fullbacks were coming to meet our wing backs, and they were going really, really aggressive. So Trippier was on Skulls, Livramento was out on Wan-Bissaka, and their midfield three, again, they were kind of just pushing man to man. So whether that was Bruno G on Ward-Prowse, whether that was Joe Linton on Souček, whether that was Tonali on Alvarez, sorry, had a mind blank there, but they were just going man for man. You could even see it from the goal kicks that we were trying. They were just pushing really high man to man, not allowing West Ham to play out. And it was forcing us to go long. I think a couple of times Newcastle underestimated the strength of Kudus. And I thought Kudus did really, really well in the first half because he was isolated a lot. And he was often the outlet in those situations. And the strength he showed against Shah, he won a lot of those battles, won free kicks. He held the ball really well. So yeah, we're going to touch on Kudus in a bit, but I actually thought he did that side of the game quite well. Jared Bowen had a really difficult test against Dan Burn in the air. He was never going to win those headers. So yeah, that's definitely not his forte or his game. But, you know, that kind of sequence, we almost had the perfect start. And it comes from Newcastle's, not naivety, but getting used to and the speed of the game and going for that man-for-man press. And you can see here, West Ham have the ball. With Newcastle have kind of shifted to the left-hand side here. Wan-Bissaka did really, really well before this to shift it across. And yeah, the ball goes out to Cresswell. And this is only 30 seconds into the game, remember. And you can see here the intent of Newcastle to press. So you can see as soon as Cresswell gets that ball, Murphy's ready to go. Isak's on Kilman. Bruno G, Tonali, Joe Linton, they're kind of covering man for man with each of their players. So Bruno G on Alvarez, Tonali on Ward-Prowse, and you can see Joe Linton and Souček in the bottom hand of your screen there. And then you can see in the top right, Trippier, he's drawn towards Skulls because they're trying to go man for man press. But what that does is creates the space for Kudus to run in behind because Shah hasn't stepped up. And Cresswell just plays a really nice pass down the line. It's nothing special, but it's a lofted ball into the channel. Kudus does really well. He's alert to the situation, cuts inside, then outside, and creates some space for himself to get this cross in. And Jared Bowen makes that run into the box. Souček, we know, will always try and push and get into the box where we can. And yeah, they failed to clear it, Newcastle. Again, a really sloppy start from them defensively, but West Ham were right on it and alert to the situation. Livramento fails to deal with it, and Souček has to score. I mean, I could not believe that this did not go in. I'm sat right where that ball ended up behind the back of the net there. And it was just, it would have been such a tone setter for this game. because it was, the atmosphere was, after that point, it started to go a little bit flat because we conceded too much possession. We allowed Newcastle to play through us way too easy. We weren't pressing enough, but that Souček chance was huge, and that could have changed the whole tone of the game. But yeah, just touching on the pressing side, I mentioned Newcastle going man to man and West Ham failing to kind of deal with that, or struggling to deal with that throughout the entirety of the 90-minute period. It was also the other way. We allowed Newcastle to play through West Ham way too easily, and there were a few occasions where Dan Burn got the ball, or we forced it back to Nick Pope. And those were obviously the triggers in the press, because Dan Burn can't really play in those situations, and neither can Nick Pope with his feet. So those should have been the triggers. And in the first half, I thought there were opportunities to do it more, but we were just a little bit reluctant to go out and press, which is a shame, because given that we'd gone into this game with 2 wins back to back, a real chance to put Newcastle under some pressure in that first half. I just feel like we lacked the intensity to do it at times, and Newcastle found it a little bit too easy to play through throughout the majority of the first half. But the other way, we were struggling in possession. After the kind of first 5, 10, 15 minutes, Newcastle started to get grips of the game. Bruno G, who I thought had an excellent game again, he was just kind of commanding that midfield, and they were just playing between the lines. You could see Barnes and Murphy. They weren't playing high and wide a lot of the time. They were coming into the pockets of space between our wing backs and centre backs, which, again, something we alluded to in the preview. They have some excellent technical players within that midfield to pass around you. And, Alvarez, Souček, Ward-Prowse, they're not the most mobile. So when you've got Bruno G playing between the lines with Isak dropping in between those spaces, you've got Barnes on the left, Murphy on the right, integrating, it can be really difficult to defend. But you'll be able to see here more kind of concretely exactly how Newcastle were playing. Every time West Ham got the ball in these situations, Newcastle were doing this exact same thing over and over again. You can see there, Isak straight onto Kilman, Barnes triggering straight onto Todibo, Murphy triggering on the other side to Cresswell. And then they had the support of their midfielders. So they were never really isolated. It was extremely rare that Newcastle's press wasn't coordinated. And we found it really difficult to deal with. But there were a couple of occasions where we injected a little bit of pace and intensity into our play, and the gaps did appear from this. This isn't always going to work for Newcastle. And what you need is players on the ball to be brave and to take risks. And Todibo does that. He cuts inside, passes to Ward-Prowse. Tonali's been drawn into that, so that then leaves Wan-Bissaka free. You can see there on the bottom middle right of your screen there, Joelinton on Souček. Ward-Prowse plays a nice first-time pass out to Wan-Bissaka. And then if we just bring it back here, you can see exactly what happens in this next sequence. Wan-Bissaka, he's already alert to that situation. So Livramento's tried to come in and, again, man-for-man press. You can see Joelinton as well into Ward-Prowse, into Souček, sorry. But Wan-Bissaka's alert to it. And Wan-Bissaka is fantastic at this. He's excellent at taking the ball first touch inside an opposition player. And that's what he does. And Livramento gets caught kind of flat-footed. Wan-Bissaka ends up in this situation. And then we've got almost an overload there, because we've got Kudus and Bowen on the back three of Newcastle there. And then you've got Ollie Skiles on the left-hand side, where this wing-back system allows us to create those opportunities in wider areas. And we work it really well. Wan-Bissaka plays it into Souček. Souček plays it into Bowen and Kudus. Bowen kind of dummies it for Kudus. And then we find ourselves in this situation. And this is where I think most fans get frustrated with Kudus, because it's that decision making, that final third integration and making the right decision, because this shouldn't be a shooting opportunity, really. There's a very high likelihood that this does not go in, especially when you have Ollie Skiles, who's made a really good run outside there, and you're left with Trippier in a 1v1. And then you've got the likes of Souček and Bowen running into the box, and Kudus himself could then make that movement in. You're almost looking at a 3-on-3 or a 4-on-4 in that situation. But again, it's decisions that let us down, and decisions that lets Kudus down a lot of the time, because, as I said, I actually think he played quite well in that first half. He was, again, if you want to go back and watch some of the clips, he was the one that was kind of the focal point in that attack. And when we were forced to go long, he was dealing with that really, really well. It was just that end product. And we've said it so many times how frustrating it can be watching someone like Kudus, because the talent's clearly there. It's just that end product, or it's just that killer instinct to know when to pass or know when to shoot. I think that's a confidence thing as well. He's clearly a player that's lacking confidence. And it's a shame, because last season he was absolutely on fire. Everything he was doing was fantastic. But just as things have dragged on, and yeah, he's just lost that way about him. Other than that Arsenal performance a couple of weeks ago, it just doesn't seem to be the same player, which is frustrating. But by and large, in that first half, we limited Newcastle to a couple of opportunities. Areola made a couple of good saves from Harvey Barnes, but by and large, it was too passive for my liking. But there were a couple of moments like the clip I just showed there that definitely suggests that we're making progress under Graham Potter. And one of the big things we mentioned when Graham Potter was coming into West Ham and replacing Julian Lopetegui is bringing some level of structure or cohesion to the team. I definitely feel like we're getting that, given the circumstance of the situation of coming in mid-season, not really having much to deal with in the January transfer window, and just trying to integrate these players how he can, and with also the injuries and stuff that we've had. So I actually think, yes, we can be critical of things that aren't necessarily going our way at the moment or things we would like to see us improve on. But the baseline's much better. I think Graham Potter's only conceded 9 Premier League goals in his first 8 or 9 games. Compare that with Lopetegui, it was over 20 goals. So defensively, we've come a much better unit. You know, we only lost 1-0 in this game. And to be honest, Newcastle didn't create too many opportunities throughout the 90 minutes to kind of warrant that it was a dominant landslide and they deserved to win. I think on balance of play, they probably just edged it. But to be honest, it could have easily been a draw. It probably would have been a fair result if it was a draw as well. So for me, it was a frustrating first half. As I said, we didn't press enough when the likes of Dan Burn got the ball. I think it was too comfortable for Newcastle to play through us. We afforded Bruno G way too much time, and that became kind of a recurring theme in the second half as well. And we just lacked that intensity in the final third to create things. And, you know, that Souček chance at the beginning, 30 to 40 seconds in, could have been such a big difference for West Ham to kind of set the precedent of that game. But we went in at halftime 0-0. There was still loads to play for. And again, Newcastle weren't dominating by any stretch of the imagination, but we were way too passive. And we tried to change that. In the opening 5 to 10 minutes of the second half, we were much more aggressive. We were on the front foot. We got a couple of corners. We were forcing Newcastle to play into areas they didn't feel particularly comfortable in. There was an urgency about West Ham, and you know it was very apparent that we'd kind of seen that shift in mindset from the players coming out after half time. But it did start to open up a little bit, and we started to fatigue in that midfield area. And as I said, you cannot afford players like Bruno G time on the ball. And that's what started to happen in the second half. And we just started to drop back a little bit. But you can see here, we're kind of in this zone here where you can see Ward-Prowse at the base of the midfield with Alvarez on the right and Souček on the left. You've got Bowen and Kudus as your front two, and Scholes has pushed up onto Trippier in this instance. Tonali plays it out to the wide position here. And this was kind of the issue that we started to see in the second half, where we were starting to lose that structure a little bit as the recoveries weren't as quick and we were a little bit less content with how we were playing. And, you know, we were trying to force things a little bit in these opening 10 to 15 minutes to try and change the balance of play. But we were affording players like Bruno G way too much time on the ball. As I kind of alluded to, when you've got Souček and Alvarez either side of Ward-Prowse, it was just creating way too much space for Bruno G because Alvarez was fixated on whether it was Tonali on that side or Joe Linton, and Souček as well, the same. And it just created that space because Ward-Prowse was at times pressing Bruno G and forcing him backwards. But because he's such a talented player, he was available pretty much 24/7 throughout the 90 minutes. And it made it really, really difficult to contain. And then you find situations like this where we're trying to sit happily in our shape here, but we're just allowing Bruno G way too much time. And defensively, this is not good enough. Wan-Bissaka's obviously pushed out and he's trying to get back in. Alvarez is covered for him, so that's absolutely fine. But Todibo has to be in line with his defense here. It's way too sloppy. The rest of the defense is in a good position. Ollie Scholes, you can kind of see here, he's got the runner on the shoulder of him. He could have done slightly better with this situation, but Todibo has to step up. But Bruno G plays a fantastic pass. It's a great run from Murphy as well to get in behind that defensive line. And then they just play a ball across. We fail to deal with it because Kilman tries to clear it and he actually slices it towards our own goal. And then we see a remarkable save from Areola. I'm not quite sure how he got to this ball. You can't really see it in this screenshot, but he just manages to get it as it loops over his head and he scoops it out. And yeah, it's an unbelievable save from Areola. And that should have been the wake-up call with half an hour left in the game. You know, we cannot afford to be sloppy. We cannot afford to give silly situations like that away. But Newcastle definitely grew in confidence after that moment, and it just gave them the emphasis and the extra bit of energy and motivation to go and win that game. And that's exactly what they did, a few minutes later. And you can see here where the Newcastle goal happens. So they've kept players up, they've pinned West Ham back, and this is the point I was making about West Ham just being a little bit too passive, especially as the game went on. You can see here where our defensive unit is. We've got so many players within our box here, which is okay, like it's fine. But we have to then stop the crosses, or we then have to stop the ball coming into the box or into those central zones, which it was way too easy for Harvey Barnes to do. And as we can see here, as we move it forwards, the first instance, Harvey Barnes tries to get it in. Todibo clears it, but it goes back to Harvey Barnes. And then we find ourselves in this situation. At the back post, you can see Scholes and Alvarez on Bruno G. He's found a really nice pocket of space between the two, but he cannot be allowed to run inside. Scholes has let him come inside of him. That shouldn't happen. He has to get goal side and stop this from happening, or we need to step as a unit and force him offside. West Ham do neither of those things. However, saying that, there's a very clear foul in the build up to this goal. Kilman goes to jump up and head the ball. Isak very, very clearly, two hands in the back, pushes Kilman. I could not believe this wasn't blown for a foul immediately as this happened, but it wasn't. Play carried on, and Newcastle get the goal, and West Ham find themselves 1-0 down, courtesy of a Bruno G goal. And I just cannot believe this was not given as a foul here. I mean, you can see it very clearly, two hands in the back. Whether Kilman was going to get the ball or not is irrelevant. He's pushed him in the back with the intent of stopping him from getting the ball. And I'm not quite sure what VAR have come out and said in terms of why it wasn't given or why the goal was given, sorry. But that cannot happen. Like, that cannot even be. It shouldn't even go to VAR in that situation. The ref has a clear view of that situation and how he hasn't given a foul there when you've seen a player two-handed in the back push someone. What constitutes a foul then? Where is the margin? Because literally 2 minutes later, after that happened, there was a push in the middle of the park on Ward-Prowse, and the foul gets given, and we get a free kick. So what is the difference between those two elements? There isn't one. One's in the box, one's outside the box, so the ref feels pressure not to give it. That's exactly what it is, and that's where I think VAR is becoming an issue, because referees are becoming over dependent on seeing, well, we've got VAR. It's kind of my get out of jail free card. If I don't give it, we've then got VAR to intervene and make the right decision. But I feel like it's making referees' performances on the pitch worse, and we're progressively going in the other direction. But I just cannot believe that wasn't given as a foul. I really can't believe it. And yeah, it was at a crucial point in the game. Look, again, the defending has to be better at the back post. We cannot allow Bruno G to get in between Scholes and Alvarez in that situation. There has to be better communication. One of them has to pick him up there. But that's besides the point. A foul's a foul. And yeah, it was really frustrating. And then again, not too long after, West Ham find themselves in a situation where they could have had a penalty. Bowen plays it into Paqueta, who's now come onto the pitch. We said about Paqueta and how he will make things happen, or try to make things happen, which is different from a lot of the players in this squad and the midfielders that we have. Souček, Alvarez, Ward-Prowse, they're not going to try these sort of passes, which is what we missed and what we lack a lot of times when we're playing that unit. But Paqueta plays a lovely pass. Bowen makes that into-out run. And you can just see Bruno's position there. He's very square to the ball. Bowen's running at pretty much full pace in this situation. So immediately, Bruno's not going to get to that ball. And he realizes that. And you can see it here. Again, it's just a clear push in the back. I'm not sure why these instances, aren't getting given as penalties. It is really besides me. And again, that's a penalty. It doesn't matter how soft you think it is. Someone pushing someone in the back to stop them from scoring is a foul. It's a penalty. That's given as a free kick outside the box if it happens. It's exactly the same as I said with the Isak push and the Ward-Prowse push. One gets given as a foul because it's outside the box. One doesn't because it's inside the box. And there has to be a level of officiating that is allowed, and referees have to take accountability for this, because there is too much of it happening across the Premier League. It's not just West Ham. It's pretty much every week. If we could go one weekend without any VAR controversy or refereeing controversy, I would be amazed. I get it. Referees make mistakes, but that's what VAR needs to be for. I know when VAR was first introduced in 2019, people were kind of advocating for it, including myself. I still think it's the best solution. However, the people operating it, that's a different question. And when they first announced it, they were like, yeah, you won't even notice it. It will be happening in the background when the celebrations are happening and the players are getting ready for restart. It's not happened. It's gone the complete other way. We're taking 3, 4, 5 minutes to make decisions. And most of the time, we're coming to the wrong conclusion. So something has to change there. But by and large, West Ham losing 1-0 to Newcastle, it was a frustrating performance. I think we lacked the intensity. I still think we're lacking that creativity. And, people are bringing up the stats around Graham Potter. And, since he's come in, we're averaging the least number of shots in the Premier League. This is obviously concerning. However, given the context of who we've played, how we're playing, I don't think it's as big as a problem as people are making out to be. Graham Potter would have come into this team, come into this managerial position to stop goals from going in, because we were one of the worst defensive teams in the Premier League. Categorically, I think we were 17th for goals conceded or 18th for goals conceded when Lopetegui was replaced. So that was a huge issue. That's been kind of rectified, and since Graham Potter's come in, our defense has got much better. However, yes, that has meant we've created less, but it wasn't great under Lopetegui either. We weren't creating loads of opportunities under him when we were poor defensively. So you have to build a platform from the back to then go forwards. We also have been missing key players. We're missing Fulkrug, our main striker. Antonio as well has been a big miss. Somerville hasn't really played either on the left-hand side. So Potter's been forced to improvise with what he's got. Paqueta's missed the last few games as well. We've got a lot of players missing, and he's trying to get the balance. And we've said it before, treat it as a pre-season. This is all good learnings for next year when we can have a good summer transfer window, bring in the players that Graham Potter needs and wants to play in the system that he does. And then we'll see, and then we'll judge it. But we cannot start panicking as a fan base or having this reactionary meltdown every time we see something like this. We've just beat Arsenal. We've just beat Leicester. We got 2 really good wins there. Yes, we've lost this game to Newcastle, and including myself, very frustrated in the way we approached it at times. But it wasn't a landslide. It wasn't an absolute smashing. Newcastle a couple of years ago came and beat us 5-1. It's you've got to provide context in these situations. I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be. And there's obviously going to be ways we can improve. That's a given. And I think Newcastle deserve a lot of credit with how they went for man-to-man press, how they forced West Ham long. And West Ham just didn't do enough of that themselves. We allowed Newcastle to play. The talent of their midfield was just a little bit better than ours technically, especially Bruno G in the midfield. As I said, he was my man of the match for that game. I thought he was outstanding. And again, refereeing decisions, on another day, Souček scores that first goal. We don't get that goal given against us for a foul, and we might get a penalty. And all of a sudden, the reaction on social media is completely different. So, look, I'm not going to panic. It's frustrating. We move on. We go to a difficult clash at Everton at the weekend against David Moyes' team, which is bittersweet to go back there. But hopefully we can get the 3 points. And yeah, we'll have our preview of that game before Saturday's encounter. But let me know what you thought of the game down below in the comments. Were you happy with the performance? Where do you feel like we need to improve? Are there any particular players that you thought played well or performed poorly? My man of the match for West Ham, difficult one to say. I actually thought Kilman had a really good game. I know people, again, like on social media, quite critical of him. But I don't see that. I thought he played really, really well. He won a lot of his aerial duels. He was very assured in possession. And he just brings that level of confidence for me to that back line that we haven't had for a while. So, yeah, there weren't that many standout players. I thought the performance was okay from most. But, yeah, that's one thing I also want to mention. Kudus, as I said, I don't think his performance was as bad as people are saying it was. I really don't. Yes, he's not at the level that we expect him to be from an offensive perspective and, creating goal scoring opportunities and scoring goals. But his overall attitude and play was very good yesterday against Newcastle. Yeah, there were times where he wasted it, but there were times where Jared Bowen wasted it. There were times where Paqueta wasted it. There were times where Ward-Prowse wasted it. These players are going to make mistakes. But his attitude was there. He was holding up the ball really well in the first half, as I mentioned. So I didn't have a problem with Kudus yesterday, or whenever you're watching this from Monday night. So again, there's areas he needs to improve on, and I think with confidence and time, we'll start to see that hopefully under Graham Potter. But yeah, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Leave a like on the video if you enjoyed the breakdown. Subscribe to the channel for more content, and until the next time, come on, you Irons.